Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Meso. Today we're going to continue a series on the MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project, and do I have a surprise for you guys today, because as a Christmas gift, Robert or FPGA Zoom's boss released one more core for 2023, and what that core does is make the Nintendo 64 run just that much faster. It is a 1.2x multiplier on clock speeds, and I'm going to be calling it 1.3 from now on to save me some tripping up on the voiceover. But as we jump right into the footage, I have left the frame counter up in the top left hand screen for you. Normally I hate looking at that, but this one is important because this new test core is absolutely amazing. We are getting frame rates out of GoldenEye and many other games that would lag on real Nintendo 64 hardware that are now so much improved in this core. You're not going to get 60 frames a second in GoldenEye, it's really not possible, but if you look at the frame rate and mostly watch the cadence on the screen of the footage, this is a much smoother, much more efficiently running GoldenEye than you've ever played before. This is just a Christmas miracle. I guess when Robert said one game playable by Christmas, what he meant was one turbo core by Christmas. Now this is just a test core, there could be instabilities and you do need to have unstable main for your MiSTer to be able to run these. But pretty much every test I did on games that had frame rates that I would say were subpar have seen improvements. Just watch the camera swing here in GoldenEye. It is smoother, it's more fluid, the animations feel better. It'll definitely slow down when you get like 4 or 5 enemies on screen at once, but it doesn't slow down near to the degree of original hardware. And that is what is so exciting about the Turbo core. This is basically a leaner, meaner version of the Nintendo 64 and FPGA that allows for that 1.2x multiplier on the clock speeds for certain functions of the actual hardware itself. Now the good thing is this does absolutely nothing to the sound portion of the Nintendo 64, so all of the sound effects, all of the music, everything else are going to be exactly as you would expect them to be on original hardware. I knew in the background Robert was toying around with something for Christmas, and I kind of hinted at it in a video last week. I don't know if you caught onto that or not. You will see here that the frame rate is going to dip slightly when there's 4 characters on screen, but it jumps right back up, and it does not dip down to the degree that you would see on original hardware. I can't stress enough just how impressive this is. Not only did Robert get a full working Nintendo 64 and FPGA, we now have a turbo core as well. And if you're not familiar with the PlayStation 1 core, towards the end of its development, he also added the PlayStation 1 2X core, which basically bumps up the clock speeds by double. I'm sure a lot of what you learned there is in employment right here as well. I definitely should have waited a little bit before I blew those tankers up, but I forgot because I was just too excited. Or maybe he should have been further away because it was running slower in the real game. But even things like Conker here, when you're running around in-game, you're going to be very close to a locked 30 frames per second in this intro area. Now this core just came out about 3 hours ago, so I haven't gotten much further into a lot of these games, so it's going to take probably a week or so for everyone to test things and see just how well they do in the future. And obviously this being a test core, it could and will create instability in certain games, so you're going to have to remember this is the leading bleeding edge day one stuff right here. But just running around this initial area, it's not the highest test thing in Conker, but as you watch that frame counter and look at the motion, you're going to see that it just stays locked at 30 until I fall into the water there. It takes a 2 frame per second dip and then jumps right back to that locked 30 frames per second. And that is the sort of performance that you're just going to get out of this turbo core. And that's going to improve a lot of games. A lot of those edge cases where you think to yourself you'd be having more fun if you had some more frame rate here, they're going to be improved in instances here in the turbo core. Now you could achieve something similar on real Nintendo 64 hardware by trying to change the clock multiplier, but the greatest thing about FPGA versus Nintendo 64 hardware modification is 1, you don't need a soldering iron, and 2, you're not really worrying about heat. But this is not an end-all be-all savior of every slow frame rate on the Nintendo 64. As Conker walks into this bar here, it definitely still chugs, but that's because they're basically putting everything on screen at once. I don't even think a 2x clock multiplier would solve all the problems in some areas of Conker, but the performance got so much better. And that performance improvement extends across so many games. Banjo Tooie here is running about 20 frames per second in the intro, but when you get into game, it's very close to a locked 30 frames a second again. And I know I mentioned earlier that this speed increase does not affect the audio processing whatsoever, so watch this buttery smooth footage, listen to this music, I'll be back in 45 seconds with more games. So yeah, Banjo-Kazooie sounds exactly as it should, with a 28% increase in the processing speed of the Nintendo 64, and that's because really the audio sections are not affected whatsoever. But it's so much fun to see something like this, and that's why I love the MiSTer project and FPGA in general. It allows you to recreate a system in Logic, and then it allows you to make enhancements that really wouldn't be possible or be very difficult on real hardware, because this is a 1.3 times uplift in the speed of the Nintendo 64. Yes, I know it's 1.28, but honestly 1.3 just sounds better to me. And these are the games you know, love, and remember, and as far as my testing is concerned, they're running exactly the same, except they're just running smoother, and that's something I think the Nintendo 64 desperately needed. And don't think I'm knocking the Nintendo 64, PlayStation 1, and Sega Saturn could 100% chug on 3D games as well. But again, just running around the world of Banjo-Kazooie here, try not to pay so much attention to the frame counter. That's why I never put them up outside of this one video that I'm doing now, because I feel like people like to focus on that numerical value as some sort of evidence. What really matters to me and what I see in this footage is a much smoother cadence of the camera movement, of the character movement, and overall how the world is drawing in. It just feels smoother, it feels better to play, it feels more responsive. It is the Banjo-Kazooie everyone remembers, it's just a better version of it. And that's why I never put the frame counter up, even when you guys usually ask me to. It's really not my sort of thing, but for this video it definitely makes a difference. Other games are going to see benefits as well. Something like the introductory scene here in Ocarina of Time as Navi flies through the village, it just feels buttery smooth. It is hard to tell sometimes if it's your memory thinking it's slower than it really is, but this fly through here just has a very nice motion to it. But leave me a comment down below and tell me what you think, and if you want to see other games tested on the Turbo core, tell me down below as well, because this was a quick turnaround video. I thought I was done for the holiday, but Robert pulled me in for one more, and that's not a complaint. You know I love doing this, guys. But that's the fun of these sort of pivots. Nintendo 64 running at 1.3 times clock multiplier is going to give you a better experience all around. Obviously you can achieve this in software emulation as well. This is not something unique to MiSTer FPGA. You can definitely bump clock speeds on pretty much any chip and any emulator. And do be aware that sometimes in some games the actual game engine is going to be tied to the speed. So you might see situations in which the game actually runs faster than it should, as far as feeling like it's almost on fast forward. Those are things that are just inherent in the game code, so not every single game is going to see a frame rate improvement without having some issue as far as the actual game speed is concerned. But just running around here, jumping over these little blocks, it just has a motion and a sense of smoothness to it that I have not yet seen on the Nintendo 64 core. And I'm sure Robert will probably iterate on this a few times, but he's just calling it a Christmas bonus. And what a Christmas gift it is. I'm definitely going to be checking this out over the holiday, seeing what other games are good, and capturing some footage for videos later on down the line. Maybe next week I'll run one more turbo testing video. But even on the indoor areas you're seeing there, it's just a locked 20 frames per second, and as a Link commits petty fraud and theft right here just by stealing rupees and blowing up some jars, it is just such a fun thing to see. Now other games are going to be slightly harder to tell, but you'll be able to tell there is a difference if I explain it to you. So as you get through this last bit of Ocarina of Time footage, just remember that sometimes you have to compare original footage to these turbo cores, which I will do in the future. Now, Killer Instinct Gold always ran well on the Nintendo 64 hardware, but people on the MiSTer Discord Nintendo 64 chat notice that the way that the screen swings around and moves feels more fluid here and closer to the arcade release. And having played enough Killer Instinct in the last month or two via testing, I can definitely tell that as well. The camera movements just have a better fluidity to them, like they're running almost at double the actual frame rate. Now whether I show you 30 frames per second footage or 60 frames per second footage, it's all going to have the same motion if it is 100% speed. But if I show you 60 frames per second footage, the fluidity is going to be different. That is what I am seeing here in Killer Instinct. Everything just moves around at a better pace and cadence. And it's just really a feel thing. Once you get to play the game, once you watch how the screen moves, you're going to start feeling the difference in speed. I'm going to give you one more sound sample as further proof that the sound has not been affected whatsoever. 30 seconds, but I still got one more game to show you, so come back. Awesome music, super fun game, and a better way to play here in the Turbo core. And that's the fun part about Robert's development process. We have options here. You have so many different options in the standard core that you can turn on for VI implementation and other features, and now you have the Turbo core pivot as well. But again, be aware that the current core and the current Turbo core do require MiSTer Unstable main. I will leave a link in the description below to my last setup guide where I teach you how to go to Unstable. Just be aware that I can't help you if you make a mistake. Follow the directions in that link and you will be fine, but don't skip over anything because somebody always does and they leave me a message saying they can't get their MiSTer to turn on and I have to help them from there. Now we have one more game to test in this video, and that's going to be Pilot Wings, because this game basically runs at an unlocked frame rate. What that means is it'll run as fast as it can at any given moment in time. So if you see an improvement, it's going to be down to the Turbo core. Now when there's more things on screen at once, it's going to draw slower. When you're looking at less things on screen at once, it's not rendering as much and you're going to get a higher frame rate. But you will see here, at least running into the first landing pad, we're almost at a locked 20 frames per second. As we get closer to the ground, we're now lifting up to about the 30 frame per second range. And that's just a smoother experience in Pilot Wings than anyone is going to be familiar with. But after we land right here, we're going to move over to the jetpack area because that really gives you full control over the entire environment, and we can really do some fly-throughs and see how the frame rate handles things. Right off the top here, if you turn the camera left, you're going to be at 30 frames per second. And as you turn the camera right and there's more effects and more models on screen, you're going to be down to 20 frames per second. But you can watch it jump up and down in real time, and that is just incredible to see. I can't stress enough just how fun of a core this is. You'll see there we were almost at 60 frames per second when we swung the camera out towards the ocean. There was less to draw. It's just going to be a better experience for Nintendo 64, and that in and of itself is one of the best Christmas gifts we could ask for. I know we've been joking around on this series for a long time that Robert promised us one playable retail game by Christmas, and all jokes aside, the overshoot on what he promised for Nintendo 64 in 2023 is absolutely hilarious. He just basically made an entire core and then made a Turbo core. The speed at which he produces this work and new cores come out are insane, but unfortunately, I have crashed right there. So that is it, the last Nintendo 64 preview before Christmas. I definitely have a lot of fun videos planned and uploaded between Christmas and New Year's, but even if Robert comes out with a 2X core tomorrow, you are not going to see me until December 27th. I will have videos the entire time. I planned a lot of fun stuff for you guys to watch. But unless there's a 3DO or a 3DO M2 core tomorrow, I'm putting my MiSTer away and I'm not capturing anything because it's the holiday season. I hope each and every one of you have a great holiday, whether you celebrate Christmas or not. And I will see you directly after Christmas with some more Turbo and stock testing videos. Bye-bye.